make members of a site that has membership. You want to create a feature that brings people back again and again, even if they're not signing up. You want to do something that basically keeps people there. So at a certain level, if you look at the downside to that, maybe what you're creating is a category of people who are addicted to your site. You can actually see that pretty much every very successful service out there has a category of people who just can't do without the service that they're using a lot. And this is actually relevant even to sites like Google. One of the things that's really interesting is that most sites try and maximize the length of a single visit, and they introduce that statistic in their slides to investors and such. But in fact, the best companies know that they want to maximize really the number of visits times the length. And you can see that the way people are using sites like Google, for instance, it doesn't require a long visit. In fact, you may spend only seconds or minutes there. But the thing that's different about Google is that you keep coming back. So their goal is actually to get you through the gates as fast as possible, but to get you there as many times as possible. And finally, I think to close this concept of the internet ecosystem, I'd like to draw attention to the idea that that the web itself is like a marketplace for attention, where the websites are basically trying to attract your attention, and the users of the web are people who have attention to give. And the capital in this marketplace, the amount of value that there is to go around, is the number of users and the number of visits that that those users make. So if you understand the web from the standpoint of being a marketplace where you're selling a product, and basically your users are buyers of that product, you can really get a sense of what it takes to make your site worthwhile for people to visit. And basically the sort of three general trends that sort of describe this marketplace to a certain extent are basically, and I'll read them in reverse order, that since there's a real sense that the web is ubiquitous and it has everything and it is everywhere, if your site doesn't have it, it's very easy for someone to just leave your site and go to some other site to get what they want. So you have to create a sense of, in my specialization, people are going to find everything they want to find. And you need to create that impression as effectively as possible. And when you make a site more sort of playful and more game-like in many respects, you increase the ability for people to interact with it. If you enable, for instance, the creation of content, make it more interactive, like a game. If you're allowing people to leave comments, etc., make it possible for them to gain status as they do so. Create a space where people are recognized for whatever it is that they're putting into your service. And again, by enhancing people's desire to, contribute to what you're doing, you're increasing the sense of ubiquity, the sense that your site is offering up a lot of stuff for the people who go there. And finally, one of the things that that I think is really interesting is that the sites you go to actually say a lot about who you are, your interests, etc. So what's tended to happen is that the successful websites have become experts at understanding their visitors, the people who come and stay at their sites, and they basically are kind of mirrors to their user base. So it's instructive at a certain level to sort of visit any old website. It can be, just a techie site, or it can be an e-commerce site or whatever. And by looking at how it looks, by looking at how it treats its users, etc., you can get a general sense of the clientele that they're interested in, the people that they think that they're attracting to their site. And the very best ones do an incredible job of keeping their eyes on all of the feature set that they need to keep their users. So to review all of that, I think what you see is that there's a number of preconditions, and these preconditions for scale have everything to do with the ecosystem. It's about sort of finding a niche that you can take over, building basically a service that supports taking that niche, and generating a feedback loop that allows the users to grow and help you occupy that niche. And before we go back to software, I'm going to just sort of look at parallels in the real world, because it's really, I think, instructive to take a very quick look at sort of periods in time or events that have had a similar kind of explosive change associated with them. And in the evolutionary past, already more than 500 million years ago, there was an event where life on Earth changed forever, and it was when life went from being single-celled to multiple-celled. And that change basically was sort of like an opportunity for incredible building blocks to be put in place. Things went from being, one to being n, and incredible combinations happened. All sorts of different ideas were tried out, some successful, some failed. And it happened over a relatively brief period of time, but pretty much, all of the multicellular life that exists nowadays can be traced back to that period. And equally many extinct family lines came up and disappeared around that time. So we're really in a period of incredible growth and change on the web, even now, even 10 years later. And looking at the parallels with the past gives you an opportunity to sort of think about, how you want to establish, your site within that space. And in economic development, you can look at, what's happened in Japan since World War II and in China since Mao, and you can see how two relatively closed-off societies opened up either voluntarily from the inside or involuntarily through outside pressure, and how they adjusted to that change, and how they actually were able to take what they'd built internally and become very much more successful in the greater environment. And I'm going to do my real-world example on an experience I had in Japan. The Seibu Group is a Japanese conglomerate that's, it's not universal in Japan, but it's definitely quite big. And I I had this